All right, today we're going to dive into this incredible story from the book of Genesis. It's all about what happens when God shows up and how two very different places react. You've got one righteous man and one notoriously wicked city. And the contrast between their welcomes, well, it tells us a whole lot about our own world. So, yeah, let's get right into it. But first, let's just do a quick thought experiment. I want you to imagine the most important person you can think of, and they just show up at your front door. Totally unannounced. What do? I mean, how do you react? Just kind of keep that feeling in the back of your mind, because that question right there is really at the heart of this entire story. So the story we're exploring today sets up this really stark comparison. On one side, you have Abraham, just a guy living in a tent, and on the other, you have this big, bustling, infamous city of Sodom. God is about to visit both of them, and believe me, their reactions could not be more different. Okay, so let's start with Abraham. His welcome, really, it just sets the gold standard for how to respond when God shows up. It's immediate, it's full of reverence, and honestly, it's way over the top. So try to picture this scene, right? It's the middle of the day in the Middle East. It is blazing hot. And Abraham, who's almost 100 years old, he's just trying to stay cool, when suddenly, out of nowhere, there are three strangers just standing there. Now, the source we're looking at makes it really clear that this isn't just a visit from three angels. One of them is what's known as a theophany, which is basically a physical, human-like appearance of God himself. So we're talking about the Creator showing up in the form of his creation. This isn't some messenger. This is the main event. And Abraham's reaction? It's just instantaneous. I mean, think about it. He's 99 years old. It's scorching hot outside. And he doesn't just walk over, he runs to meet them. Then he bows all the way down to the ground, a huge sign of respect and humility. And then boom, he's up and getting to work, serving them. It's this amazing three-part response: run, bow, serve. It just screams honor and urgency. This quote from the source sermon just perfectly captures the whole vibe of Abraham's posture. That bow, it wasn't just, good manners. It was this deep, internal recognition of the vast difference between himself and God. It's the starting point for everything: humility. And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the huge gap between what Abraham says and what he actually does. His humble offer, he says, oh, just a little water, maybe a morsel of bread. But what he actually prepares? Oh, just a full-blown feast fit for a king, sparing absolutely no expense. And this number right here really shows you the scale of his generosity. I mean, it's just wild. He tells his wife, Sarah, hey, grab 3 measures of the best flour. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but the source material points out that's somewhere between 40 and 60 pounds of flour. 40 to 60 pounds. This isn't just a light snack he's whipping up. He is mobilizing his entire camp to cook up an absolutely massive, extravagant feast. Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, you have to remember the context here. In the ancient world, you can just check into a Holiday Inn. Hospitality wasn't just a nice thing to do, it was a literal lifeline for people on the road. So Abraham is doing his cultural duty, for sure, but he's doing it with a level of excellence you'd reserve for royalty. And the result of this incredible welcome is pretty profound. God doesn't just, accept the food and leave. He sits down, he eats, and he confides in Abraham as a friend. The source highlights that God eating in human form is incredibly rare in the Old Testament. In fact, it doesn't really happen again until Jesus is dining with his disciples, who he also calls his friends. So this newfound friendship, it immediately comes into play. After the meal, God reveals his plan. He's going to judge the city of Sodom. And this is where Abraham, now a friend of God, does something absolutely remarkable. He starts to bargain. He comes to God not with demands, but with a question that's actually rooted in God's own character. He appeals to God's sense of justice. He's basically saying, surely a just God wouldn't destroy innocent people along with the guilty, right? And this kicks off one of the most fascinating negotiations you'll ever read. Okay, what if there are 50 righteous people in the city? For their sake, will you spare it? And God agrees. Yup, for 50 righteous people, the whole city gets a pass. But Abraham knows Sodom. He knows finding 50 good people there is probably a long shot. So very humbly, he pushes a little more. Okay, what about 45? And again, God agrees. Still, Abraham is worried.
The source explains that he knows just how wicked this city is, and that's what's driving him to keep going. He's not trying to test God's patience. He's desperately trying to find a number low enough to save his nephew, Lot, who lives there. So he goes down to 40, and then to 30, and God agrees every single time.
And finally, he lands on this number, 10. For the sake of just 10 righteous people, will you not destroy it? And God gives his final answer. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. Just think about that. The entire wicked city could be saved by a tiny minority of righteous people. So what's the big takeaway from all this? I mean, what does this ancient negotiation have to do with us today? Well, the source draws a direct line from this story to the idea of being the salt of the earth. Now, when we think of salt, we mostly think of flavor, right? But back in the ancient world, its main job was to be a preservative. There was no refrigeration, so salt was the only thing keeping meat from completely rotting. It was a force against decay and corruption. And there's the connection. Just like salt preserves meat, the presence of righteous people preserves the world. God was willing to hold off judging an entire city that was just overflowing with wickedness, all for the sake of a handful of good people. And that is the central idea that the source material really wants us to grab onto. This story isn't just ancient history. It's a model for understanding the role of God's people in any time, in any culture. Their very presence acts like a restraining force, like a preservative that holds back the decay and buys more time for grace. And that leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. This story kind of forces us to ask ourselves, what does it actually mean for a few people to have the power to preserve the many? And if you're one of them, what kind of responsibility comes with being the salt of the earth?